Two nearly perfect murders committed 40 kilometers apart within just 24 hours. A tattoo artist impossible to overlook, and a modest teacher. Could these crimes really be connected? The tangled mystery begins to unravel with three small letters, shakily scrawled by a victim's trembling hand. Then came a chase for treasures and antiques, and finally a small object capable of making everything bigger helped the police realize that both victims had crossed paths with the same ruthless killer, yet one who was merely a puppet in the hands of two shadowy masterminds. On the evening of March 16, 2013, snow unexpectedly returned to the French town of Enourian. The air was cold, and cars crawled one after another along the snowy roads. Fortunately for 47-year-old Jose Barrera and his girlfriend Laura, they had no need to hurry anywhere. They enjoyed the comfort of their home, peacefully watching television under a warm blanket. Suddenly there was a knock at the door. Both Jose and Laura were surprised since the clock's hands had already passed midnight. Laura wanted to go, but Jose stopped her. No, stay here," he said, walking toward the door. Laura then heard an unfamiliar voice claiming that their car had been accidentally hit. Moments later, Jose stepped outside, leaving her inside. After a few minutes, she heard a car engine start. Looking out their window, she saw a vehicle speeding away. But why hadn't Jose come back yet? When she went outside, Laura found him lying unconscious in the snow, a pool of blood beneath him. She couldn't even understand where the blood was coming from. Panicked, she hurried to call an ambulance. Jose was rushed to the hospital, where doctors discovered he had suffered a brain hemorrhage and swelling. His life was still in danger. Examination revealed a small bullet, likely .22 caliber, lodged in his head near his nostril. At that moment, however, the bullet could not be removed to confirm its caliber. The attacker had fired a single shot from no closer than 80 centimeters away. If the shooter had been any closer, the burning gunpowder would have left corresponding marks on Jose's face. In other words, Jose had been shot. But this was madness. Could it really be that a stranger had shot him just because of an alleged accident with his car? In fact, Jose's vehicle was completely untouched. It had all been just a pretext to lure him outside, where the gunman was already waiting. The police officers working at the scene of the attack on Jose found absolutely nothing. The perpetrator had left no trace behind, no shell casing, no hair, no fingerprints, no DNA. Laura could offer little help either. She had seen a dark-colored car speeding away from the house and thought there were two people inside. She couldn't even say for sure whether the voice she had heard was male or female. She hadn't heard a gunshot either. Such a beginning did not promise anything good. It was clear the investigation would be difficult. So the detectives began by looking into the victim's life. Jose Barrera had a striking appearance that might have suggested a turbulent lifestyle. In reality, though, he led a quiet, modest life. He had only recently become a father for the fourth time, and his children meant everything to him. He adored them. His memorable looks were explained by his work. He was a tattoo artist. Still, police had crossed paths with him before. Sometime earlier, Jose had been in a motorcycle accident, leaving him with lingering leg pain. He took painkillers, but they were useless when the weather changed. That was why he grew cannabis. The problem was, he not only used it himself, but also sold it. Because of this, investigators suspected that the motive could be linked to drugs or to a debt connected to them. Officers seized Jose's phone, business cards, address book, anything that might help uncover who he had been dealing with. A few days later, the family and the police received good news. Jose was brought out of his coma. His loved ones believed he would recover. The investigators, meanwhile, hoped he might remember something about the attack. The man could barely speak, but he managed to scrawl just 3 letters. EML. Jose's girlfriend, Laura, immediately thought of Emily Visor, Jose's ex-wife and the only person with whom he had serious conflict. Emily was 26 years old. She had left her husband 2 years earlier, and since then the former spouses had been locked in a bitter custody battle. Jose wanted to spend as much time as possible with his 5-year-old son, while Emily did everything she could to prevent it, accusing her ex-husband of mistreating her. The police invited Emily to the station to ask about her whereabouts on the night of the attack. She explained that she had dinner at a fast food restaurant and then went to her boyfriend's place. Her phone records confirmed this. Emily had not been at the crime scene. Yet aside from the 3 letters Jose had managed to scrawl, detectives had nothing at all to go on, just in case the police wanted to tap the woman's phone. But unexpectedly, they discovered that this was impossible. And that was because her phone was already being monitored by the police in connection with another case. one that had taken place just a day before the attack on Jose, 40 kilometers from his home in the village of Como. On Friday, March 15, 2013, as she did every Friday, Miriam arrived at the home of her beloved 45-year-old Dominique Llas. She was surprised when Dominique didn't answer her knock at the door. Her surprise grew when she realized the door was unlocked. Pushing it open slightly, she immediately saw Dominique lying face down in the hallway, barefoot in a pool of blood. Miriam rushed to the phone, but there was nothing anyone could do for Dominique anymore. When the paramedics and police arrived, they determined that the man had received a single, precise, and powerful stab to the heart. That one blow was enough to kill him, as Dominique's heart was practically cut in two. But the killer did not stop there. The victim's body was covered with multiple hematomas. Bruises were found on his forehead, both shoulder blades, his right forearm, the left side of his nose, and the upper part of his skull. His arms also bore wounds indicating that Dominique had tried to defend himself. Investigators concluded that Dominique had been having dinner when the killer knocked on his door. As soon as the homeowner opened it, the attacker struck. That meant the assailant had come already armed with a knife. He knew he was going to kill. This could not have been a robbery, since apart from Dominique's phone and rifle, nothing appeared to be missing. Nevertheless, the intruder had searched the house. Was he looking for something specific, or was it merely an attempt to stage a break-in? Most likely the latter. The killer left no trace behind. No fingerprints, no hair, no DNA, nothing. Which meant that in this case too, there was neither a murder weapon nor any physical evidence. As for the time of death, the last time Miriam spoke with Dominique was on March 14, 2013, at 5:49 p.m. He seemed busy and promised to call her back, but never did. He turned off his computer at 6:55 p.m., but did not turn it or his phone back on the next morning, as he always did. Thus, he died either in the evening of March 14th or during the night of March 14th and 15th. Dominique was a dedicated teacher, passionate about his work. He lived alone in his modest house and had no children. He had known Miriam for a long time since his student days. For a while, they lost touch, but eventually reunited. His relationship with Miriam was wonderful. Dominique's friends and relatives also loved, valued, and respected him. And yet someone had driven a knife into his heart. Digging into his life, detectives found only one person with whom Dominique had had serious difficulties: his ex-girlfriend, Veronique Pierre. They had once been madly in love, living together for 13 years, though during that time they broke up and reconciled around 8 times. They first met after Dominique was in a car accident that left him with a broken femur. While in the hospital, he fell under the spell of a striking nurse. Veronique may not have been a beauty in the classic sense, and she was more than 10 years older than him, but she impressed Dominique with her extravagance. She was kind, yet incredibly hot-tempered. Combined with her pathological jealousy, this was a recipe for disaster in Dominique's life. It is little surprise that on one occasion, Veronique hurled a flower pot at his head, breaking 2 of his front teeth. Dominique's friends recalled that after Miriam came back into his life, Veronique flew into a rage. And beyond her jealousy, Veronique had another possible motive to attack her ex and search his house: a real treasure. Dominique had a rather unusual hobby. He spent all his free time in the fields of Picardy with a metal detector, searching for relics and ancient coins. In the evenings, he would study his finds under a magnifying glass. Sometimes a friend would join him, and together they tried to figure out what treasures they had been lucky enough to uncover. Veronique shared Dominique's passion, and in 2011, the two of them made a remarkable discovery in the forest: a genuine treasure worthy of a museum. It was an antique jewelry set valued at around 4,000 euros, the most expensive find Dominique had ever made. The set included a gold bracelet, a necklace, and earrings. Such discoveries were extremely rare. Unsurprisingly, the couple clashed over it. For Dominique, the items were pieces of history. For Veronique, they were a way to make money. This disagreement led to yet another conflict, one that ultimately ended their relationship. After the breakup, Veronique made it her mission to ruin Dominique's life. When he began dating Miriam and their split seemed final, Veronique showed just how dangerous she could be. She reportedly told Dominique, "I will kill you and you won't even know when." She even sent friends of hers to threaten him, demanding that he hand over the treasure. When police learned of the jewelry set, they searched the victim's house. They found a large collection of old coins and bits of iron, but no jewelry. Had the killer taken it? The police were very eager to talk to Veronique. They had expected to encounter a dangerous treasure hunter and were very surprised to come face to face with a frail woman leaning on crutches. Nevertheless, she turned out to be quite self-assured and even a little haughty. Of course, she stated that she had nothing whatsoever to do with the crime. She did not try to be lenient toward the deceased. She described him as a narcissistic womanizer responsible for their breakup. She has no idea what Dominique did with the found jewelry, and in any case, she has an alibi for the evening of the murder. She had dinner at home with her nephew, Mallory Kubel. He came to fix something in his aunt's bathroom and at the same time introduced her to his girlfriend. They all ate pizza together, after which the young couple left around 9 in the evening. The police asked to check the woman's phone and saw that she and Mallory exchanged 11 messages on March 14th between 4:12 p.m. and 5:55 p.m., even though he was supposed to be at her house. At this moment, Veronique's phone is indeed at her home. Mallory confirmed that he was at his aunt's on March 14th. However, according to him, he arrived closer to the evening but didn't have the necessary tools, so he went back home, had dinner with his girlfriend and her son, and then took the tools and went to his aunt's. He stayed there for about an hour and left around 11 at night. Mallory's phone confirmed that he had called home and exchanged messages with his girlfriend. The police have not yet determined whether the discrepancies in Mallory's and his aunt's accounts are a mistake or a minor lie. In any case, this caught the detectives' attention. They decided to start monitoring the phones of all three: Veronique, Mallory, and Mallory's girlfriend, 26-year-old Emily Weiser, the same woman who was the ex-wife of tattoo artist Jose, who had fallen victim to a brutal attack. That is precisely why Emily's phone could not be put under surveillance. It had already been monitored by officers working on a different case. At that time, the only link between the two cases was Emily. After speaking again with Jose's relatives, the detectives learned something very curious. The man's sister revealed that when Jose first started dating Emily, she had asked him to eliminate her ex-boyfriend. Jose, of course, dismissed this wild request, but now, when Jose himself had become Emily's former lover, he suddenly was shot in the face. What if Emily has a certain fixed idea that her ex must die? The police hoped that Jose would be able to clarify the situation once he recovered, but his condition suddenly worsened. He passed away, and now the police faced the task of solving his murder. Thanks to the police's persistent investigation, it was possible to determine what happened to the jewelry that Dominique had found. The man had sold it 2 years earlier for 3,000 euros. This meant that if the killer had come for the treasure, he would have faced bitter disappointment. However, the criminal did manage to take something with him, aside from Dominique's phone and rifle. When the police finished their work at Dominique's house, the residence was handed over to the deceased's family. His relatives unexpectedly discovered that Dominique's magnifying glass, which he used every evening, was missing. It was a very unusual magnifying glass with an inscription on it. It was not unique, but such models were very rare. While the theft of the rifle could be explained, why would the criminal take the magnifying glass? Could it be that he was also searching for ancient treasures? Or did he take it as a trophy? In either case, the only person for whom the magnifying glass could have any real value was Veronique. Therefore, on November 20th, 2013, at 9 o'clock in the morning, police officers arrived at the woman's house with a search warrant. In her home, they found neither the stolen phone nor the blood-stained clothing. Only the magnifying glass remained as a hope. One of the officers tried to put himself in Veronique's shoes to figure out where she might keep the trophy. Obviously, most often, the woman spent time on the sofa in the living dining room, and when he turned his head 360 degrees, the officer saw on the shelf behind the sofa what he had been looking for: Dominique's magnifying glass. This was the first and only time during the investigation that Veronique was left speechless. The police now had evidence linking her to the crime scene. The police immediately arrested the woman. But at the police station, she quickly recovered. The woman indignantly denied any involvement in the crime. After all, she knew that aside from the magnifying glass, the investigators had nothing. What she did not know was that, at the same time, the police had brought her nephew Mallory and his girlfriend Emily to the station. The police knew that the victims, Jose and Dominique, had never crossed paths. In fact, the only link between them was not Emily, but Mallory. He was the young man who knew Emily, Jose's ex-wife, and Veronique, Dominique's former lover. The police became interested in him and conducted a search of the home Mallory shared with Emily. There they discovered an exact floor plan of Jose's house. Mallory explained that he had drawn the plan intending to turn Jose into the police as a drug dealer, but changed his mind and left the plan at home. That was why the police found it. Of course, the investigators did not believe this story. They decided to put pressure on what seemed to them the weakest link in the trio. The police were right in assuming that Emily would be more cooperative. She had a small child who had already lost his father, and she could not leave him without a mother. Emily began to talk. The truth emerged gradually, but by evening, the detectives already knew that Mallory Kubel and his aunt had killed Dominic. At that time, Emily was at home with her mobile phone, pretending to be her boyfriend and exchanging messages to provide him with an alibi for the evening. When the other suspects were informed that Emily had started giving testimony, they realized that her confession changed the rules of the game. Their lawyers advised them not to resist and to follow her example. This is how it all began and what really happened. When Emily started dating Mallory, she began her usual refrain about needing to get rid of her ex. But this time, she acted more subtly. She told Mallory every day that Jose had supposedly behaved badly and even abused her when the couple was going through their hardest times. In 2009, the couple had another child, a boy, who was diagnosed with a rare tumor by the doctors. He spent a year in the hospital. This was very hard on both parents, but Jose supposedly became increasingly harsh toward Emily and allowed his friends to flirt with her. Unable to bear it, she left her husband and demanded that he stay away from the children. But Jose understood that the boy might not survive and continued to visit him in the hospital. Emily claimed that it was in the hospital, where their sick child was, that Jose had abused her. It is worth noting that the police and the investigating judge did not believe her. They knew that Jose was deeply grieving the loss of a child, was crushed, and had even lost 30 kilograms. However, Mallory unfortunately believed Emily. Considering that Jose had decided to fight for custody of their other child, Emily became convinced that Jose had to disappear. On the evening of March 13, 2013, Emily had dinner with Mallory and Veronique and again spoke about the suffering Jose had caused her. She could no longer tolerate his interference in her life with her son. She saw only one solution. Unable to resist her pressure, Mallory decided to get rid of his beloved from Jose. But he had never killed anyone before, so he asked his aunt for help. Veronique agreed willingly, but with one condition. "My dear, of course, I will go and help you kill Jose, but first we must kill Dominic." Thus they made a pact, one murder for another. All the roles were assigned. The aunt and nephew armed themselves with a wig, gloves, and a pistol and went to Dominic's house. Emily was supposed to create the impression that Mallory was not at the crime scene. Mallory knocked on Dominic's door. Through the door, he explained that his car had broken down. Dominic, a very kind and responsive man, opened the door. Mallory immediately attacked him. The men grappled, but the struggle was brief. Dominic fell, pierced by a knife in the heart. Suddenly, Veronique intervened. She pounced on the dying man and began beating him with the pistol. She seemed to have gone mad. She kept hitting him over and over. Finally, she stood up and looked at Mallory. Veronique was ecstatic. She rejoiced. She kissed her nephew and said, "Thank you, my dear." On the way back, the accomplices burned their clothes. They had planned to kill Jose the same day, but Mallory became ill. He was nauseous after the nightmare they had committed. Therefore, the next day, while Emily was at home, the accomplices set out again despite the bad weather. They were rushing to Jose. Veronique knocked on Jose's door. She lied that she had hit his car. Under this pretext, she lured him outside and led him to a corner where Mallory, with the rifle stolen from Dominic, was waiting. After a single shot to the head, Jose was killed and the accomplices hurriedly fled. Mallory was charged with the murder of 2 men. His aunt and girlfriend were charged with complicity in the murders. But a new drama was about to unfold, turning everything upside down. On August 15, 2014, at 9 o'clock in the evening, a prison guard began his regular rounds in the detention center, where Mallory had been held for 8 months. However, upon opening his cell that time, the guard discovered the young man's body. 32-year-old Mallory had found a way to hang himself. In the letter he left to his mother, he explained that he could no longer live with his crimes. He could not bear the deaths of 2 people. Paradoxically, he may have been the only one among the accused to show any compassion for the victims in this case. Upon learning of her nephew's death, Veronique hurried to take the opportunity to claim that there had been no pact. That fateful evening, she said, she had gone to Dominic to talk, to ask if he still loved her. But instead, Mallory suddenly attacked the man. During the assault, Veronique supposedly stood behind her nephew and could not foresee the strike. It was entirely Mallory's personal initiative. The wig and gloves she wore, she claimed, were because it was chilly and she wanted to look good. Possibly. But why did she go with her nephew to Jose's house the next day? And could she really not see the rifle? According to Veronique, the second crime was also unexpected for her. She was genuinely shocked by Dominique's death and was in a state of trauma, so the next day everything happened mechanically. The idea of luring Jose out of the house under the pretext of a broken car belonged to Mallory. Once again, she expected nothing and could even have been injured as she stood next to Jose when her nephew fired. Thus, the aunt decided to shift all the blame onto her nephew, whom she simply adored. In a sense, Veronique had been like a second mother to him, as his relationship with his parents had been complicated. Many years earlier, she had saved his life. The young Mallory had a congenital intestinal defect, and because Veronique was a nurse, she was able to help him in time and save him. From childhood, Mallory found comfort in visiting his aunt during holidays. And when at 20, he experienced a personal tragedy after a car accident that took his younger brother's life. His aunt was there to support him as always. Over the years, a single look from his beloved aunt was enough for Mallory to understand that he had to kill Dominique. Mallory had never met Dominique, and there had been no quarrels or conflicts between the men, and now Veronique was trying to convince the police and the investigating judge that Mallory had decided out of the blue to kill her ex-boyfriend. The trial began on November 14, 2016. Veronique and Emily were tried together. They faced life imprisonment. Would they try to place all the blame on Mallory? Of course. The defendants claimed that they could not have made a pact because they had only met that evening. But the prosecutor had an unpleasant surprise for them. A photograph taken just a few days before Dominique's murder. The image clearly showed that the truth was far from the comedy that unfolded during the court proceedings. During the trial, Emily pretended to be an innocent victim in the story. Veronique, on the other hand, behaved offensively, especially toward the families of the victims. She blew them air kisses and even dared to claim that, as he was dying, Dominique had turned to her and said, "Forgive me, my dear. I love you." It was horrifying. But the victims' families conducted themselves with dignity. They hoped that the defendants would be justly punished under the law. Finally, the court delivered its verdict. Veronique was sentenced to 20 years in prison, and Emily received only 10 years. However, since Emily had already served nearly 3 years, she was released a few months later and returned to her child, Jose's son. The victims' relatives consider this outcome unjust, believing the punishment too lenient for both accomplices. After all, Mallory had merely been the armed hand of 2 women who were in conflict with their exes. It was these women who decided the fate of 2 men in a single evening. This is an incredible story of collusion between 2 vengeful and unscrupulous women, almost a perfect murder.